when people are watching later. So feel free, if you don't want to be on camera, you can turn your camera off, that's fine. But otherwise, I like having people that I can see when I'm just talking. So I want to, part of the reason I did that introduction, like I said, was so everybody knows that they're not alone. In fact, at the state board level, it is looking more and more likely like I'll be doing 2 more years of presidency, because I've done the last 2 without a vice president, and currently don't have any board members who are wanting to step into that role. We are looking at reconfiguring our board layout to try and take some roles and spread it out across more people, not necessarily more board members, but as you're kind of realizing, there's a lot of going on, there's a lot of helpers, there's a lot of things where people aren't wanting to take on an entirely big role. So that is one of the things that I really recommend doing, is figuring out how to break that down. So the nuts and bolts of how to recruit new leaders is ask people. And most people haven't joined a PTA because they haven't actually been asked to join the PTA, or they feel like as soon as they join the PTA, that means that they're going to have to take on some sort of major leadership role, right? So there is a balance between asking people to join and asking people to be leaders. So those are a couple things that are good distinctions to make. And when we say we're a membership organization, that can cause issues, but how you manage that membership at your level, at your school, at your unit is up to you. So sometimes we have people who say, if you show up at a meeting and you want to be a member, you know what, we're going to pay for your dues. We're just going to absorb that, and you can be a member if you want to be a member. And then, still fill everything out, but it's the PTA that's paying those dues. Or you have people scholarship, instead of paying for 1 membership, they maybe pay for 2, and then that can go to offset that. But what you're getting when you're becoming a member of PTA is you are a member, what I call a bottom-up association. You're a member of your local unit, you're a member of Minnesota PTA, and you're a member of national PTA. So you're open to getting all of those resources that are out there. And the value of PTA is that we have one large voice. And I'm going to say something shocking, and that is the point of PTA is not fundraising. We fundraise so we can advocate. I mean, yes, am I the person who helped fundraise a bunch of money for a playground? Yes. Am I the one who our PTAs used to supply planners for 5th graders? Yes. But that is not the entire goal of this. So I say when we're doing stuff to help our teachers and students at our school to get stuff that they need, like everyday supplies, that's not the goal. Ours is to supplement, to go above and beyond that. But we all know we buy glue sticks for the 1st graders. I mean, that's just part of what we do. But while we're doing that, we should be working in tandem to advocate so we don't have to do that. So we can work with the legislatures and, to get better funding for schools. So there's my little advocacy pitch. And I don't want that to put more work on your plate. In fact, I'm hoping that takes a little bit of work off your plate, recognizing that, our goal should not be to raise, $50,000 a year. And if you're carrying over like twice your budget, then maybe you don't do a fundraiser that next year, because that is not the purpose of what we do. We're here to build community and we're here to advocate. So that's my little pitch about that. One thing that I feel that helps with recruiting new members or new leaders is to have clearly defined roles. So what is expected of the president? What is expected of a secretary or treasurer? I think that helps put things in perspective as far as the time commitment and things like that. Now, I am working on job descriptions right now because they need to be updated, especially post-COVID, because a lot of things have changed. Just the way we run things has altered, and we've discovered other ways of doing things that are equally effective, but not as much work. So keep it in the back of your mind, like think of how many people do either Zoom or hybrid PTA meetings, and if that's affected your involvement that you get from people at all. With the clear job descriptions, then it's clear steps for activities, or what I like to call handing off the proverbial binder. The password to the Google Drive that has how you run the spring carnival, what you need for movie night. How many of us are guilty of saying, I'm just going to do it myself because it's easier than telling anybody else how to do it? I mean, for sure, right? Because if I don't have to tell you how to do it, then I can just go and do it, even though I'm running ragged and it's driving me crazy and everything. I mean, oh, well, you can put questions in the chat and then we'll address them. Thank you for that question, Allison. So as big of a pain as it is to keep those notes and that running thing, it is better if you are keeping track of things so then you can pass it off, because you're never going to get a volunteer to do something if you're like, okay, I want to do we need to do a movie night next year. And they're like, how many bottles of water do I need to buy? Where does this money come from? What is the cost? What was, how many people did we expect? And so with all of you being on here, I can tell that you have the initiative that you want to get people recruited and on your board and coming to your membership and with your leadership and everything. Take that time so then the next person doesn't have to. Because if you take that time now, it's going to make it easier for everybody else down the road. So clear steps for activities. We try to send out timelines and like the back to school packet. These are the things you should be doing when. So those are all things that help ease that burden. Okay. Allison, do you want to ask your question? Oh, here. Oh, okay. Yep. We will come back to that in a little bit, but yes, that's a good one. That was the Zoom versus hybrid versus in-person. So with all of that being said about how to pass the proverbial binder, I mean, I highly recommend, if you don't have it yet, get a Gmail account for your school and have a drive in there that has everything, because that's so much easier to pass on to person. And your officers may share the login information for that, or however you want to deal with that. But it's just so much easier to be like, here's a password. If you go into the drive, everything is there. Now, with all that being said, don't set the bar too high. And what I mean, and I'm guilty of this too. This is like my confessional for how not to run a PTA. Is if you're the one who's like, oh, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, and you're available for everything, everybody will look at you and say, there's no way I can do that job. There's no way I can fill that president role because, oh my gosh, did you see how many things Amy had to do to keep that job going? So I'm hearing a lot about burnout, a lot about people being, wanting to step down. Set rules. Your treasurer should not be writing checks more than once a month. Reimbursements need to be in by this time so they can be reviewed by this, and then we'll write checks, at the meeting. The secretary, getting minutes out, should be set to do something. And you should not be doing more than like one event a month, if you're even doing that many. I mean, and this is independent of the PTA meeting. Simply because if you're doing one event a month, that's more than enough to be building community and getting people together. And then the other thing that we always talk about is you should be doing 3 for 1, which means for every one fundraiser, you should do 3 things that are not fundraisers. And those don't have to be big, and you don't have to not charge, but the point of it should not be to build or to be a fundraiser. So maybe you have a movie night and you don't charge for the movie night, but you charge 50 cents for a bottle of water because you're just trying to break even for that. So those are a couple different things right there. Volunteering is way down. Like I think it's gotten a little better, but right before, like right in 2019, 2020, right before quarantine and everything happened, it was down like almost 90%. And that's been eased a little bit, but still we're talking probably 80% down. Because burnout is real. I think it's twofold. People were burned out. We're still in the midst of the pandemic, right? But dealing with those first 2 years was mentally and emotionally exhausting for everybody. But also, I think some people realized, hey, you know what? I don't have to do all this. And my life is still pretty happy and fulfilled. So it's kind of a 2 sides of the same coin there. And because of that, we've had a lot of COVID turnover where, I heard a couple of people say we've had a complete turnover of the board. People just left and didn't come back, which really stinks because then you didn't get trained in on your positions. But that is part of the value of PTA, is that we are here to help you by being a member of of your local PTA, you're a member of Minnesota PTA, and we have resources for you. If you haven't been to the National PTA website, there are resources galore there, how to run your PTA. Membership recruitment, leadership training. We have thrive.pta.org, which has videos about how to train, or training videos, learning management system for how to do the different roles. So those are all super important things to realize. Coming on these webinars, there's a lot of new names on here, but every Tuesday at noon, we're talking about something. We've talked about advocacy. We've talked about upcoming convention. We've talked about treasurer stuff. We've had drop-ins where people can just drop in and ask any questions that they want. It just is really, that's part of what makes a PTA so much more effective at times than a PTO, because you have support from us. So I just really want to lift that up. So Stephanie, thank you for joining. I haven't yet. Could you put your name and PTA in the chat, please? So I'm going to take a breath there and I will take some questions. So the first one was from Allison. Who's doing Zoom or in-person meetings? Does anybody want to speak to that? Let's say, okay, if you want to use your little function, your little thumbs up function. So this is like therapy. Right? I mean, I think it just makes you feel good to know that you're not alone. Like if I could sing, I would be singing. Mm-hmm. And so who's doing Zoom meetings? Marie, Natalie, Lucy, are you still doing a Zoom option? Mm-hmm. Jessica. So is anybody doing only
these people peer Zoom? I'm sorry, are they peer Zoom or a hybrid, I guess, when you raise your hand?
So let's do that. So who's doing only Zoom meetings? Okay. Then we'll wait for the little thumbs to go down before I ask my next question, not to confuse anything. Who is doing only in-person meetings? Just a couple. And then who's doing hybrid meetings? So in other words, it looks to me like people are doing meetings that fit their location and their school. Because I mean, it's about a third, a third, a third. So I think that that's one of those where it is, sorry, I'm just reading the chat here. I can't multitask right now when I'm trying to do this. It just kind of depends on your thing. I noticed that a lot of people are missing in person, but I like the idea of adding a social time to it. Because the hybrid in the Zoom does allow a lot of people to attend when they can't. So even for state board, we have a monthly Zoom meeting most months, but then 3 times we meet in person. We usually do like a retreat in August. We were able to meet in January, and then we'll all be together at convention in April. So those are all things that we kind of try to do to balance what that is. So is there any other questions right now? Question, comment? Okay.
I had a question on the Zoom accounts itself. Does your PTA pay for a membership fee, or do you go off of your school, or is that part of the Minnesota PTA?
It depends.
How are you guys doing that?
Some schools use or some units use their school's account. Some units pay for their own. Minnesota PTA we have our own Zoom account, which, I mean, in a perfect world, we would be able to farm out to our units, but we have 200 units, and trying to schedule that would be a downright nightmare. So,
Okay.
Lucy, you have a question or comment?
I'm multitasking as well. So just as an FYI to you guys, I haven't been able to use it properly, but with COVID, you can qualify for Google nonprofit with your PTA. It's complicated to apply for it though, but it gives you 2 hours of your Google meeting. So it's not Zoom, it's Google meeting. But now we've been using this, the principals creates the Google Meets for us, and then that way we know we're covered, because we've realized another problem that we have that I wanted to ask people if you guys had that issue is if you use our Gmail account to share the Google Meet, staff can't log into our account with that. Did that question make sense? So our
staff
can't get in.
Hmm.
That's another reason why I wanted to create a nonprofit email address.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't know how to raise my hand.
That's okay, Molly, go ahead.
I'm used to Google, sorry, but we did the nonprofit for ours, and we do the Google when we've had a couple of virtual meetings. We've done the Google Meets for 2 hours, or we get the extra time. But we also had the same problem with the Rochester School District's accounts won't let us log into like private Google accounts for meetings. So that's why I think.
Interesting. I'm just going to make a note of that since I'm in Rochester. I mean, I wonder if that would be alleviated if the principal did the Google Meet. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. When the principal does it, it works fine. So yesterday, I have my PTA meeting tonight. So I use now that I work for RPS, I use that one, and that'll be my test. But I'm always nervous when I do hybrid, because now last year we had someone to do IT, and now I do the setup of the IT. I run the meeting. I have to keep my own notes, and I'm all confused with everything that's going on now, because I can't do it all. I really can't. And I've asked for help, but we do what we can with what we've got. So it's all good. Yay, team.
I am going to say something about that too. If you don't have somebody to do the spring carnival, don't do the spring carnival. Because if it is important enough for somebody to want it, then somebody is going to step up to do it. But it is not your job to do it as a PTA person. or as an officer of the PTA. And the other thing is that, you know, don't do something just because, oh, my older kids enjoyed it, or, oh, I had so much fun doing this when I was a kid. You know what? I enjoyed my freshman year of high school, but my daughter had to do it online. You know, it's like things change, and people change and expectations change. And there are so many ways to engage people without bending over backwards. One of the best fundraisers I ever did, which doesn't have to be a fundraiser, but in our particular case it was a dance. A case of water, bag, you know, box of chips, some candy, turn off half the lights in the gym, and have somebody on their iPod or phone, I guess now. I was on my iPod back in the day. But, you know, community building, people show up, costs are minimal, volunteers are minimal. You know, those are things that people can do and you can do as a group to involve people. But anyway, so my point is, let it go away, because it is not on you to provide enjoyment, excitement, opportunities for everybody else's child. We will advocate for everybody else's child, but we are not the sole people who do that. And I think that's part of the problem at the high school, especially, is because we have so many different things, especially those of you who have PTAs and booster clubs, very different focuses, but it's hard to balance the two of them when booster club is taking up so much of that time. Allison?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to what you said. Like one of the only reasons that I accepted taking the president job this year is because Laura and others said, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do a carnival. You don't have to do events. You can cancel it all. Like, we just need a PTA. And so that was really refreshing to know. And we have canceled a few events. We have also, we sent a letter out through to the entire school, just really not like threatening, but just really like giving them the lay of the land of like what it's like. Like, there's 5 people who do everything. We have 700 kids in our school. Like, things are going to start getting canceled. And we have, and it's been a lot of work for all of, I think, the 4 board members that we have to get people engaged. But it's worked a little bit. I would, you know, we're still looking for officers, but we have gotten people to, you know, volunteer for the carnival committee and the events and stuff. And so I would just say, speaking from experience, it worked on me that if you promise people that they don't have to do events, they might be more apt. And then once they're in the position, they probably will do them anyway, as we've done. But I just agree with everything you said. So thanks for saying it.
Oh, thank you. Jennifer.
I just kind of want to piggyback off that too. I've been really clear and telling everybody we're not doing anything until people step up. Like, that's what I've been saying, honestly, for 2 years. I've been president for, I think this is my 8th year, way too long. I don't have an yeah, I see the shocked faces. Yeah, it's been a while. But I was just in the position of transition when COVID hit. So that all kind of fell apart. But I've been very clear with people that I am here as a president role, but I am writing agendas, holding meetings, and that's it. Like, that's all I'm doing. If you want activities and events to happen, you need to find people to do it. And we've had a couple different ones. But the other thing I want to touch on too is we used to do a bingo event, which was super fun. We always had a packed one. We did, Jenny is here in Wilmer, and so they always donated turkeys. So we did a turkey bingo, and then we did a bingo for books, which was super fun. Had a packed house every time. But we found that during COVID, we switched that to an in-school event, and it actually was able to incorporate all the students. So it really was a refreshing thing for me personally, because I was very excited that we had all of our student population be able to participate versus just the kids who could get a ride and come with their families. So change is good. It really, it's hard not to hold those community of, building events, but at the same time, I think the goal is to have our students participating in fun events as they can within their school. But yeah, don't be afraid to step back and say, forget it. I can't handle anymore. Because then all of a sudden people start going, wait, why isn't that happening? Then you get to explain to them, well,
Mhm.
you need people. So it's been a good conversation starter for us here.
Definitely. Thank you, Jennifer. Joanne.
I just wanted to share something new that I tried and what I learned this year from it for this. So at the beginning of the year, what I tried that was kind of new is I did like parent involvement opportunities, and I did a giant sign up genius with I broke everything that possibly could be into a committee. So we had like a legislative committee, a community collaboration committee, and then like a 2-3. Then I didn't get specific, even though we used to have like historically had events be a certain thing. I just kind of said like 2-3 fun, K1 fun spring event. And then, when I talked about it at the meeting and when I sent it out, I said, you are not committing by signing up in this to be a lead. You're just signing up to learn more and seeing if you're interested in being involved. And it was really great because I also, before doing it, I talked to the board about like how I sort of saw it as a vote from the membership to see what they wanted their year to be. If no one signs up for 4 or 5 nights, say, then maybe we say like we're not having 4 or 5 night, and maybe 4th and 5th graders can use their funds for something else or whatever. And then, like this is where people's interest lies. So it also gives us that. And then it also gives us committees. What I did learn though, that I would do differently from it, is it kind of depended on who signed up in the committee. So some committees, it worked perfectly. We did the first initial meeting and kind of said like, these are some ideas of how it worked in the past. This is your budget. Say if it was an event, what does everybody want to do? And then people kind of took their own thing like, oh, I'll research donations for food. I'll do this, I'll do that. And it worked like, a well-oiled machine. And then there were other committees where people were like, oh, I'll just do whatever you want me to do. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm leading this. So it just kind of depended. And then the other hiccup with it was I realized like I had such a positive response, which was great, but all of a sudden I was like, excuse me, I have to meet with 14 different committees and send out polls on when they can meet and be that initial person and get that going when there's like other stuff that comes up that you didn't anticipate was coming up. So that was a little bit overwhelming. So I think if I had to do it again, what I would do ahead of time is talk to my board and like sort of divide those committees up and say like who's going to take on the initial meeting with them, and then let them kind of run from there and see. So that's what I would do differently if I had to do it again.
That's great, Joanne. And yeah, I like that where it's, I'll meet initially with you and give you guidance, but our participant has said the speaking language to Spanish. Am I in Spanish now? No, so it must just be
No,
their
I'm
own.
sorry. I was just trying it.
No, but does it translate then, Bridget?
Well, it's in Spanish, but I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know how accurate it is. Because I'm pretty sure I didn't say tyrants, Pete, and stick.
All right.
I'll just turn
Okay,
it
so there's 3 questions, but I want to address one thing before we keep going. And that was a question that was in the chat. So Marie, Monica, and Nosha. Oh, no, did I say it right? Nusha.
Yep.
Okay, you're next up. But the question was the formalness of meetings. So what I want to say about this is we have Robert's Rules of Order, so then when we need it, we have it. So we don't have people coming in and like taking over meetings or dominating anything or trying to overthrow the chair or whatever, right? I mean, in these times, crazy things can happen, right? I have not heard of any of that happening in Minnesota, so far so good. but that's why we have it. When I ran meetings, our business meeting was like teeny tiny part of the actual meeting, because think of what you need on record. You know, because the business meeting is when minutes are happening. So, you know, what do you need on record? You're only required to have one business meeting a year. I really think it probably should be two, because you probably need to have one in the fall for budget and one in the spring for elections. But as per universal bylaws, so like your first one, I always tell people at the first meeting, I'm like, this is going to be boring because we need to approve the budget, because we can't spend any money until we approve the budget. So please come back next month. But if you have other stuff happening, like the principal's report, or we used to have like our art teacher came and would talk about what the kids will be learning in art, or our behavioral specialist came in and talked about what PBIS is. So that doesn't need to be part of your business meeting. It doesn't have to be that formal. The other thing I highly, highly recommend is having anybody who's giving a report sends the report to the secretary, and that is part of the minutes. And they don't have to give the whole report at the meeting, because then when the minutes go out, then that's with that part. I mean, maybe they'll give like a brief synopsis, but their written report, an emailed report or whatever, is part of the official minutes. So that helps alleviate some of that. And then as soon as you're kind of done with that nuts and bolts, and honestly, a business meeting does not need to take more than 15 minutes most months. And even if that, you know, principal's report, president's report, treasurer, maybe an approval, you know, I mean, that's all it should be most months. And you don't, I mean, and as much as I am a Robert's rules nerd and love my gavel, it can be more loose than, you know, than a actual like, oh, the chair now recognizes Jennifer to speak about blah, blah, blah. I mean, you don't have to be like that. But if you need to, then that's when you get the gavel and you're like, all right, you've talked enough, be quiet. I'm going to mute you now, you know. So that's how I would get around that. So bottom line, think of what needs to be part of the official business meeting, what needs to be on record. And then everything else. And then maybe you have like the introduction part, you have the short business meeting, and then everybody breaks and has a time to work in their committees or whatever. So, oh, thank you. Are there any questions on that right now? And then I'll go back to the hands that are up. Stephanie, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm the treasurer. So in the past, prior to being the treasurer, I was always kind of confused by what the treasurer was presenting. It was just like super fast, and I really didn't have time to understand. And it was really fast. And so when I took over, I just operate differently, and I'm not a treasurer by background at all. And so I was really detailed. We had a lot of things that needed to be clarified. And so I got a little more in the weeds with explaining, you know, why we had credit card charges that had been left on a card being paid over COVID, like some awkward stuff. And but now that things are kind of sorted out, are you saying like literally I just say that I gave the treasurer's report to the secretary and then they can look at it when the meeting minutes are posted?
Yeah, or maybe you say, you know, you can give that out and then you can be like, this was the big thing that happened this month. You know, are there questions on it? But you don't have to go through every single charge. And one thing I highly recommend also is that whoever's on your executive board sets a pretty detailed budget. Because what that allows you to do then is you don't have to spend business meeting time discussing and approving expenditures. So like maybe you have like a small part of unassigned dollars that are available, like if you go over somewhere or anything like that. But in general, your budget should be set in September. And I'm not saying you can't change it, but I'm just saying there shouldn't be a debate every single month on money that needs to be spent out.
Okay.
So like
Yeah.
to use this for an example, like Joanne said, spring event, you can budget spring event. And, you know, they know what their budget is. Stephanie, did that
Right.
help?
Yep, I think I would just kind of say like this month, this big check went through and our checking total is this.
Mm-hmm.
And looking ahead, we plan to have these charges oncoming and funds are sufficient.
Exactly. You don't have to go through like every line item of the budget. I mean, that's something you need to be doing, reconciling it, you know, having somebody look it over anyway at your kind of at your monthly meetings. So you're going to catch any discrepancies or any, like, I always recommend doing that reconciliation or having somebody else check it out right before the meeting. Because then if they have any questions, then you know that those are probably things that you need to address at the business meeting.
Okay.
So, all right. I'm going to go, it was Marie, then Monica, then, and I'm going to say it wrong because that's what I do. Nusha.
Nusha.
Oh,
No problem.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. It's one of those where now it's stuck in my head on the reel. All right, Marie, what was your question?
I just blanked and can't remember. Oh shoot.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I talked way too long.
No, it's gonna come to me. I had the question about the formality of things, so thank you for addressing that. But then I had something else. I mean, you also told me at the beginning of the year, like you don't have to do things, and thank you, because that also has saved us a bit. I have people who want to do things. I guess I have a good amount of energy in volunteers. I think we're small still, but we have a lot of energy. But I don't have anybody just stepping up to just do those things. If that makes sense. Like and I guess maybe this is why I found myself in the president's role. Like I am a doer and a figure out, and I dug into the drive, and I've sent the drive to so many people, and they just don't necessarily look at it or use it as the tool that it can be. And I don't know how to fix that. I mean, part of me is just stepping back and saying, I can't do it anymore, but is there any other ideas, I guess, to find doers or like allow people to just get in there and get their hands dirty?
Yeah, and that's a good way to kind of segue into this is, you know, a lot of us get into these roles because we're leaders and people, you know, want to work for leaders, and we're natural leaders. And I'm speaking for myself with the royal we. But what we find out is that we're oftentimes managers. And I think, Joanne, you found that out with your first, you know, when you're trying to organize the first meetings. And so, yes, we are PTA managers. When we get to be leaders is before we get into this, like the officer position, and then after we get out of the officer position. And this has really actually helped me wrap my head around it, because I'm like, I don't have fun with PTA anymore. But it's like, oh, that's because I'm managing, not leading. And then like, oh, okay, well, this is fun again, because I was able to shift my focus as to what my role is, right? So like leaders, managers, and doers totally get you with that, because it's like, we need people to do without a lot of direction. I mean, and I know there's times when we're all like, how do you run a household if you can't, you know, you can't do this? And I think that part of it is just people don't know where to start. So start on our PTA officers page, Member Hub. If you're not on there, they have great ideas, especially for fundraisers. And they're more than willing to work with you. Pinterest, I mean, come on, we're old, middle-aged women. Everybody should have a Pinterest account if you don't. but those are all great places to kind of start and just be like, hey, you know, look and see what you can do. So, and, you know, addressing what you were saying, Marie, it's like you share the drive, but you know, everybody's brain works differently. And I'm sitting here writing paper and pencil while we're talking, so I don't forget things. You know, there's other people who'd be typing, there's other people who just totally remember. So it's kind of trying to find what their niche is and how they learn best. So I hope that addressed your question. If you think of another question, Marie, let us know. Monica?
Well, I just want to piggyback on something that Joanne said. We also did a Sign Up Genius with looking for volunteers for the book fair or a school dance or teacher appreciation. And it was great to get all those names. And then on back to school night, we had, please give us your email so that we can more efficiently communicate with you. And we got all these great names, and then there was no follow through. And so I'm just trying to state the obvious, that somebody on your team or your board or committee or right-hand person needs to be there to say, let's follow up, let's follow through, because we have, I think we got 107 names at back to school night last year, and I don't know if we've done anything with them. And that's just a travesty. So, and we're middle school. So I'm going to tell you, if you're not in middle school yet, the PTSA or PTA is very much downsized. When I joined the PTA in 2020, there was 2 co-presidents and that was it. And I was shocked because, of course, I came from elementary going, what? There's not like 25 people here. So, and that was a virtual meeting. And I'm like, how can you not be involved in a virtual meeting? But I digress. So I'm just wanting to state the obvious that, you know, make sure that you're following through on those Sign Up Geniuses and lists to make sure that those people that have expressed an interest, that you grab them and you pull them in and you give them one small little thing to do. And then hopefully they're hooked. So.
No, that's a great point too. And we've had that same issue where we have convention April 14th and 15th. If it's not in your budget, put it in there and come, because that's another way to really get leadership, is to bring them to convention. So I think, Amber, you have to let me know, when is our next convention? Oh,
I will look at that right now.
Okay, so our next webinar, thank you. Speaking of your right-hand person, oh no, who did we lose? I can't tell. I'm sorry. I know it's 1 o'clock. I'm going long. Is so bring people to convention. We'll circle back around to that. And I'm going to call on Nusha. Well, I mute myself when my clock rings.
Sure. I just have a comment and a question to add to Joanne's thoughts. Our model is such that we've got the 4 officers, and then beneath that we have a committee that manages our 8th grade party, our book fair, and then teacher meals. And then outside of that, kind of how it works is I just tell them in transition the need and the role, explain to them, and then they go off and run with it. So that's been super helpful. So I have no ownership on it. But what we do require, and I've been on prior boards in other areas, not education, that we require the individual who's spearheading, say they're on the fundraiser or the book fair, to find their replacement. So it's not on us. And so, for example, right now, I'm asking people who are planning the 8th grade party to think of who they can find as a replacement. It just makes it a lot easier. So that's my comment there. And then as it relates to the middle school, I feel like it's the forgotten school because most parents are burnt out, like you had mentioned, Amy, as it relates to elementary school. So by the time they come to middle school, they've kind of done their time. I did no volunteering. I did marginal volunteering in middle school, and then they didn't have a PTA president when my daughter started last year. So I just stepped in and they said, oh, you don't have to do anything. And it's turned into just a bit more. It was a COVID year and a lot of parents did, well, my kids did that, so I want to do it this year. And this year is a transition year. But what we're finding is it's not so hard to find the replacements for those committees that are, more like the book fair, et cetera. It's the head roles. Our treasurer was is not interested, and I'd love for her to stick around, but she wants to leave. And then as a president, I don't know. I mean, outside of asking around and putting blurbs in the elementary school and putting on our Facebook page and mentioning our team or our meetings, which is usually just the officers, where else can we ask? And then the defined roles, like where can we really spearhead to get people? And then my other question is how often, what's the frequency of your meetings? Because our attendance is high, like the first one, and then it really dwindles down. So I was curious, what's the requirement? And then how often are people having meetings?
The requirement is only one business meeting a year, although I feel like at least every other month, especially at the middle school and high school level. Most elementary I know of meet monthly. Where do you get people? Talk to your teachers and talk to your principal, talk to your family engagement people. They're going to be the best ones who know what families you might be getting. So that's another pool that you can look at. So I want to make sure to get to Stephanie's question before we're done here. Anusha, and did I answer everything?
You did, thank you.
Okay, all right. I'm like, wait a minute. All right, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, sorry, this is kind of just piggybacking off of prior. We just post our treasurer's report to Member Hub, but our meeting minutes we post on our website. And I don't know why we don't put the treasurer's report there, but basically by submitting the treasurer's report to the secretary, that would kind of be like one PDF with the minutes and the treasurer's report in the future.
It could be, yep.
Okay.
Or else, yeah, or the treasurer's report is just in it, what she puts in the minutes is just what you say at the meeting, and then you put the treasurer's report in Member Hub so your members can see it.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be, okay, cool. It can just be stated that that's where they are.
Yep.
And then, so we're doing our first hybrid meeting next week, in person and Zooming somehow, I guess. And so I don't have to show anything because previously I was showing like, the treasurer's report.
I mean, you can show it, but I don't think it needs to be like a huge detail. It's not like it's embargoed. It's not like you can't show it, but I would say maybe put a link in the chat on the Zoom so people can do that, look at it that way, or, there's ways for people to access it without having to, I always say, most of us are pretty good readers. I mean, if there's a language barrier, that's a totally different, a different ball game that you're playing with there. But okay, most of us can just read through what things are.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Did anything show up in the chat? Joanne, go ahead.
Sorry to talk again.
No, that's okay.
As we're recruiting for next year, so I have like a couple people that at the beginning of the year signed up for our nominating committee for next year. And I just wanted to go over because I know like that's the one committee that I'm not supposed to.
Right.
So as far as like how can I mean, I can give them like the list of like these are the roles. Can I say like here are some people that might be interested? Is that
yep.
I just want to know like what is my role with helping them?
Yeah, I mean, as president, you know a lot of people and who's shown interest. And so that's totally okay to give them names. Depending on interest. I mean, I work pretty closely with our nominating committee just because we don't have a huge committee. And because I do know people and so we do work closely together, but I don't have any say in what happens necessarily. It's more so who wants to fill which role.
But it's okay to say like, these are some people that might be interested that have volunteered before. Yep. Okay.
So Amber put in the chat on February 21st at noon, we're going to talk about our 100th convention. There is a birthday party on Friday, April 14th. In Bloomington, and then the convention itself is Saturday, April 15th I don't know if we have any reflection schools on here, any schools who do reflections, but there is the reflections award ceremony that evening, the 15th. Oh, I love it when pets make a, hi kitty. We don't have any pets, so I always like looking at other people's. Reflections award ceremony is Saturday night. So it's basically like 24 hours of all things PTA, from birthday parties to awards to convention and leadership training. The registration for convention is going to open up in the next week or so. We're just working out some final details. It's $100 for one PTA member, $175 for two PTA members, and then $25 for each additional PTA member from that same unit. So get a carpool together and, you know, get 5 people to come up to convention on Saturday, because it's a great way to just meet and network. I mean, look at the conversation that we had on here and just talking to other people. I think knowing you're not alone is a huge thing. You know, and one thing, you know, I said we're trying to look at redoing our structure at the board level. And part of it is that we're creating some non-board positions that fall underneath the board positions, because then they don't have to come to every board meeting, but they could. And it's just kind of trying to get people exposed to what's going on. And yeah, it's just asking people and bringing them along. You know, one of the best things I always say is like, who doesn't want a Saturday away from their kids every once in a while? Come up to PTA convention. Oh, I have to go to the PTA convention. And then you get to like hear some good speakers and get some training and network and talk to other adults all day. You don't have to cook lunch. You know, it's a great opportunity to just get out and meet all of these people that we're seeing on here. So are there any other questions right now? And thank you for hanging out. I know the introductions took a little bit longer than I thought, but I appreciate everybody hanging out.
I just have a quick question about the closed captioning. So Bridget and I were chatting offline a little bit about it. It sounds like I know she left, but they're going to try it later this week at a meeting. I believe once closed captioning is enabled, it then generates a transcript at the end of the meeting.
Yep.
Is that something, can you share that with us so we can see? Because I know just recently the closed captioning was not very good, but initially when it was turned on, it did look like there was some legible Spanish. I would be interested in having someone who speaks Spanish review it and see what they think of it. Is that something you can share?
Amber, I think it is. Because I think when we download the recording and I think the closed captioning will come with that.
So, and that's possible, but from what I understand, the closed captioning only appears on the person's end that starts that. So I prompted it for a little bit in Dutch because I wanted to see what it looked like, and I wasn't quite sure that it was actually coming up appropriately. There was some language in there that seemed to be reflecting other words. So I know Carla, if somebody does have that translation that appears, Carla might have an opportunity, our secretary, to glance at that and just kind of look it over to see. Because
when I clicked on the to show them it, I had a pop-up saying like, the people that get the meeting information get the transcript. So I don't know if anyone we would get it or if you guys would get it, but I know Bridget had Spanish enabled originally and it did look like Spanish. That would explain why it looked different because you changed it to Dutch. We were confused.
Sure. Oh, okay. So that was universal then. When I did the change, it changed universally. Is that what you said?
Bridget told me that it's picked for the entire meeting. You can pay $5 a month extra for people to select their own language, but otherwise it's for the entire meeting.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, we'll see what we come up with on our end and then let you know what that looks like. And then we can send you some information on that.
Great. Thank you.
All right. And then what's next week's topic? Family engagement in the family school partnership standards. It'll be next week's at noon. So thanks, everybody.